The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds that sparkled with the light of 1,000 worlds. Representatives from over 400 species filled the vast space, their varied forms creating a tapestry of evolution that had taken millions of years to weave. At the center of this cosmic assembly sat the High Circle, 12 beings who had guided galactic civilization for over 10,000 standard years. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the petitioner's podium, her simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments surrounding her. The translator implant behind her ear buzzed softly as hundreds of different languages filled the air with whispers, clicks, harmonics, and electromagnetic pulses that served as communication for the diverse gathering. She had prepared for this moment for 3 years, ever since humanity had been granted the opportunity to request membership in the Galactic Council. The Zephyrian Prime Minister, Veltar, rose from his crystalline throne. His ethereal form shimmered like captured starlight, and, when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of cosmic authority. The Council recognizes the representative from the species that calls itself humanity. The way he pronounced the word dripped with barely concealed disdain, as if it tasted bitter on his ethereal vocal cords. Elena straightened her shoulders and activated the holographic display before her. Images of Earth appeared, showing the blue marble that humanity called home. Cities glowed like scattered jewels across the continents, space elevators stretched toward the stars, and orbital habitats dotted the space around their world like mechanical moons. Honored council members, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, I come before you today to formally request humanity's admission into the Galactic Council. We believe our species has much to offer the greater galactic community. A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the assembly, though it came in forms ranging from melodic trills to subsonic rumbles that Elena felt more than heard. The Catharian delegate, an insectoid creature with chitinous plates that reflected the chamber's lights, clicked its mandibles in what Elena's cultural briefings had indicated was amusement. Tell us, little human, Veltar said, settling back into his throne, what exactly do you believe your species can contribute to a civilization that has mastered faster than light travel for 15 millennia? Colonized 17 galaxies, and achieved technological capabilities that your kind cannot even comprehend? Elena had expected this question. Her diplomatic training had prepared her for the casual dismissal, the barely veiled contempt. She advanced to the next hologram, showing humanity's achievements, the cure for aging, the development of quantum consciousness transfer, their innovations in stellar engineering, and their recent breakthrough in dimensional folding technology. We have made significant advances in multiple fields, she replied calmly. Our scientists have developed new approaches to problems that have challenged galactic civilization for centuries. We found ways to reverse entropy on a local scale, created sustainable pocket universes, and our philosophers have contributed new frameworks for understanding consciousness that bridge the gap between organic and artificial intelligence. The Moravian representative, a being that existed as pure energy contained within a geometric crystalline structure, pulsed with colors that Elena's translator indicated as scoffing. Child species often develop interesting toys, it communicated through modulated light frequencies. We have seen such innovations before. They are curiosities, nothing more. The Zarathi delegate, whose species resembled a cross between a cephalopod and a geometric puzzle, extended several of its tentacle arms in a gesture Elena recognized as dismissive. Your species has existed for what, 200,000 of your planetary cycles? We have individual members of this council who predate your entire evolutionary line. What wisdom could you possibly possess that we have not already discovered and discarded as primitive? Elena felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was not going as she had hoped, but it was going exactly as Earth's strategists had predicted. She moved to the next section of her presentation, displaying humanity's military capabilities, their defensive technologies, and their exploration achievements. Perhaps our perspective offers value precisely because we are young, she said. We approach problems without the preconceptions that come from millennia of established thinking. Our military strategists have developed new tactical frameworks that the chamber erupted in what Elena could only describe as cosmic laughter. The sound came in waves of different frequencies, from the high-pitched whistling of the Silithians to the deep, resonant pulses of the gravitonic collective. The noise was so intense that her translator implant temporarily overloaded, filling her head with static. Veltar raised one of his translucent appendages, and the laughter gradually died down. Military capabilities, he said, his voice carrying amusement that transcended species barriers. Child, we have weapons that can unmake solar systems. We have defense grids that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. We have fleets that number in the quintillions. What could your small world possibly offer us in terms of military might? The Catharian delegate stepped forward, its multiple eyes focusing on Elena with predatory intensity. Your entire species numbers what, 10 billion? 12 billion? The Hive maintains soldier castes that exceed your total population by several orders of magnitude. A single one of our dreadnoughts carries more firepower than your entire planetary defense grid. Elena forced herself to remain calm, though she could feel sweat beginning to form along her hairline. Numbers are not everything, she replied. Innovation, adaptability, the ability to think outside established paradigms, these qualities can be more valuable than raw power. The response was another wave of laughter, this one even more intense than the first. The Moravian representative pulsed so brightly that Elena had to squint against the glare. Adaptability, it flashed. Child species, we have adapted to survive the heat death of previous universes. We have evolved beyond the constraints of matter itself. Your species still relies on chemical reactions for consciousness. You are biological curiosities, nothing more. The Zarathi delegate's tentacles writhed in what Elena now recognized as barely suppressed mirth. Perhaps we should preserve a few of them, it suggested to the assembly. They could serve as interesting museum specimens, examples of early-stage sapient evolution. Elena felt anger flare in her chest, but she forced it down. Losing her temper now would only prove their point. Instead, she moved to the final section of her presentation, showing humanity's cultural achievements, their art, literature, music, and philosophy. We may be young, she said, but youth brings energy, creativity, fresh perspectives. Our artists have developed new forms of expression that transcend the traditional boundaries between different sensory modalities. Our musicians have created harmonies that exist in mathematical spaces your technologies cannot access. Our writers have crafted narratives that enough. Veltar's voice boomed through the chamber, causing the artificial clouds overhead to swirl and darken. We have heard enough of this presentation. The Galactic Council has reached its decision. Elena felt her heart sink. She had known this was a long shot, but she had hoped that something in humanity's achievements might spark interest, might show these ancient beings that her species had something to offer. The species known as humanity is hereby denied membership in the Galactic Council, Veltar announced, his words echoing through the vast chamber. Furthermore, your species is designated as a Class C civilization, suitable only for passive observation and limited contact protocols. Your world will be quarantined to prevent your primitive influences from contaminating developed systems. The words hit Elena like physical blows. Class C designation meant that humanity would be essentially imprisoned on Earth, cut off from galactic civilization, treated like children who couldn't be trusted with adult responsibilities. However, Veltar continued, his tone taking on a mocking quality that made Elena's skin crawl, we are not without mercy. We shall establish a monitoring station in your system to observe your development. Perhaps in a few million years, when your species has evolved beyond its current primitive state, we might consider re-evaluating your status. The Catharian delegate stepped forward again, its mandibles clicking in what Elena now understood was cruel amusement. We shall assign a junior researcher to observe their progress, it announced. Perhaps a graduate student looking for an easy thesis project. The study of primitive tool-use behaviors might provide some minor academic interest. The laughter that followed was perhaps the cruelest sound Elena had ever heard. It came from hundreds of species, each expressing amusement in their own way, but all united in their dismissal of humanity as irrelevant, primitive, beneath notice. Elena stood at the podium for a long moment, feeling the weight of failure settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. 3 years of preparation, decades of human achievement, the hopes of an entire species, all dismissed as the toys and games of children. But, as she began to gather her materials, preparing to leave the chamber in defeat, something inside her began to change. The anger she had been suppressing started to transform into something harder, colder, more focused. These beings thought they knew humanity, thought they could judge an entire species based on their preconceptions about youth and primitiveness. They had no idea what they had just done. Elena looked up at the assembled council, her expression calm but, her eyes holding a promise that none of them were sophisticated enough to recognize. "Thank you for your time," she said simply. "Humanity will remember this day." As she walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber, Elena could hear the continued laughter behind her. The ancient species of the galaxy were so amused by their own superiority that they completely missed the significance of her words. They would understand soon enough. The transport back to Earth took 18 standard days, crossing the vast distances between the galactic core and humanity's small corner of the Milky Way. Elena spent those days in her quarters, reviewing the recordings of the council session, analyzing every word, every gesture, every moment of the cosmic humiliation her species had endured. She wasn't planning revenge, that would come later, and it would come from minds far more strategic than hers. She was planning something much more dangerous. She was planning to prove them wrong. When the transport finally dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, Elena felt a surge of emotion that surprised her with its intensity. The blue marble of her homeworld hung in the blackness like a jewel, its surface swirled with clouds, its continents traced with the lights of human civilization. It looked so small, so fragile, so utterly insignificant compared to the vast stellar empires she had just left behind. But appearances, as she had learned, could be deceiving. Elena transmitted her report to the United Earth government before her shuttle even touched down at Geneva Spaceport. By the time she reached the UEG headquarters, emergency sessions were already being called, and the leaders of humanity were gathering to hear the news that would change everything. The debriefing room was filled with grim faces. President Chen Wei sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as Elena finished her report. Secretary of Science Dr. Sarah Mackenzie looked like she wanted to break something, while Admiral Rodriguez of the Space Defense Force was already making notes on his tablet, his military mind undoubtedly calculating angles of attack. "So," President Chen said finally, his voice carefully controlled, "they think we're children." "Worse," Elena replied. "They think we're insects. Barely worth studying, certainly not worth respecting. They've essentially put us under house arrest for the next few million years." Dr. Mackenzie slammed her hand on the table. "The arrogance! They dismiss innovations that took our greatest minds decades to achieve as toys. They treat us like we're some primitive tribe that just discovered fire." "In their defense," said Dr. James Wright, the UEG's chief xenobiologist, "from their perspective, that's essentially what we are. Some of these species have been developing technology for longer than complex life has existed on Earth. To them, we probably do look like children playing with sticks and stones." Admiral Rodriguez looked up from his tablet. "Children with sticks and stones can still put out an eye if they aim correctly," he said grimly. "The question is whether we're going to accept this judgment or do something about it." President Chen leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. "What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral?" "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time for these ancient beings to learn that youth has advantages they've forgotten," Rodriguez replied. "They've been playing the same games for millennia. They think in terms of established patterns, conventional wisdom, traditional approaches. They've become predictable." Elena felt something stir in her chest, hope, perhaps, or maybe just the desire for vindication. "You think we can actually challenge them?" "I think," President Chen said slowly, "that they've just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They've united humanity behind a single purpose, and they've done it while underestimating us completely." He stood up, moving to the window that looked out over the Geneva skyline. "They want to quarantine us? Fine. They want to treat us like children? Let them. But they're going to discover that human children have a tendency to grow up faster than anyone expects." Dr. Mackenzie was already pulling up holographic displays, her scientific mind racing ahead to possibilities. The dimensional folding technology, they barely looked at it. They have no idea what it's actually capable of. And our quantum consciousness research, they dismissed it as philosophical curiosity. Because they've never encountered a species that developed those technologies so early, Dr. Wright added, excitement creeping into his voice. They follow established progression patterns. Biology first, then chemistry, then physics, then exotic sciences. But humanity jumped straight to the exotic because we think differently. Admiral Rodriguez nodded grimly. They expect us to behave like every other species they've encountered. They expect us to follow their rules, accept their judgment, know our place. His smile was not pleasant. They're about to learn that humans have never been very good at knowing their place. President Chen turned back to the room, and Elena could see something in his eyes that she recognized from her own reflection during the long journey home. Cold, focused determination. Dr. Mackenzie, I want you to form a special research council. Take our best minds from every field and give them unlimited resources. Their job is to take every technology the council dismissed and push it beyond anything those ancient beings think is possible. Admiral Rodriguez, you're going to prepare our military for a type of warfare those species have never encountered. They think in terms of massive fleets and overwhelming firepower because that's how galactic conflicts have been fought for millennia. Show them that humans fight differently. He looked directly at Elena. And, Ambassador, you're going to help coordinate our response. You've seen their arrogance firsthand. You know how they think, how they dismiss anything that doesn't fit their preconceptions. That knowledge is going to be our greatest weapon. Elena felt a fierce smile cross her face. What exactly are we planning, Mr. President? We're going to give them exactly what they asked for, President Chen replied. They want to study primitive humanity? They're going to get a very close look indeed. But, by the time they realize what they're actually seeing, it's going to be far too late. As the meeting broke up and the various departments began their urgent preparations, Elena found herself standing at the window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was continuing its ancient business, secure in their superiority, amused by their encounter with the primitive humans. They had no idea that they had just awakened something that would change the galaxy forever. The war was coming, though the Council didn't know it yet. And, when it finally arrived, they would discover that the greatest mistake in galactic history wasn't underestimating humanity's capabilities, it was underestimating humanity's willingness to prove everyone wrong. 6 months had passed since the humiliation at the Galactic Council, and Earth had transformed into something unprecedented in human history. Every major city hummed with activity as underground research facilities expanded like vast technological root systems. The old boundaries between nations had dissolved almost overnight, replaced by a singular human identity forged in the fires of cosmic rejection. Dr. Sarah Mackenzie stood in the primary laboratory of the Prometheus project, watching as her team made history. The facility stretched for kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, its corridors lined with technology that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The dimensional folding chambers alone consumed more power than entire continents had used just decades before. Status report, she called out, her voice carrying across the vast space where hundreds of scientists worked with focused intensity. Dr. Kenji Tanaka looked up from his workstation, his eyes bright with excitement despite the fatigue that marked everyone working on the project. We've achieved stable fold ratios of 1 to 47,000, he announced. A single cubic meter of folded space now contains the equivalent volume of a small moon. Around the laboratory, other voices began reporting breakthroughs that would have been celebrated as Nobel Prize-worthy achievements in the old world. Dr. Amara Okafor had successfully created self-sustaining pocket universes that operated on accelerated time streams. Dr. Lu Wei had developed quantum consciousness networks that allowed human minds to operate across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Dr. Yuki Sato had weaponized mathematical constants, creating bullets that existed in 17 dimensions at once. But, perhaps the most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Marcus Webb, a young physicist who had been working on theoretical applications of human emotion in quantum mechanics, approached Mackenzie with results that made her question the fundamental nature of reality itself. Dr. Mackenzie, he said, his voice barely containing his excitement, I think I've discovered why the council was so wrong about us. She turned to face him, noting the mixture of awe and fear in his expression. Explain. Webb activated a holographic display that showed complex mathematical equations dancing through three-dimensional space. Every species in the galaxy follows predictable patterns of technological development. They master their environment, then their star system, then interstellar space, following logical progressions based on expanding their sphere of influence through increasingly sophisticated tools. Mackenzie nodded. This much they had understood from the Council's dismissive reaction to human achievements. But humans are different, Webb continued, his voice growing more animated. We don't just adapt to our environment, we force our environment to adapt to us. We don't just use tools, we become the tools. Look at what we've accomplished in just 6 months. The hologram shifted, showing the exponential growth curves of human technological advancement since the Council's rejection. The rate of innovation was staggering, far beyond what any mathematical model would have predicted possible. It's not just that we're developing faster, Webb explained. We're developing in ways that violate the established patterns. We're creating technologies that shouldn't be possible for a species at our stage of evolution. And the reason is emotional. Mackenzie raised an eyebrow. Emotional? The Council species have had millions of years to achieve stability, to reach equilibrium with their capabilities. But equilibrium is the enemy of innovation. They become so sophisticated that they've forgotten what desperation feels like, what it means to have something to prove. Webb's hologram now showed brain scans of human researchers compared to theoretical models of advanced alien neurochemistry. Human emotions aren't just psychological quirks, they're evolutionary advantages that we've never lost. Our anger, our pride, our refusal to accept limitations, these create cognitive states that literally alter the quantum fields around us. The implications hit Mackenzie like a physical force. You're saying that our emotional responses are actually affecting our research outcomes? I'm saying that human consciousness operates on principles that the Council has never encountered, Webb replied. They think logically, efficiently, predictably. But human innovation is powered by contradiction, by the refusal to accept that something can't be done. We're not just building better technology, we're building impossible technology, and our refusal to believe it's impossible is what makes it work. Before Mackenzie could respond, alerts began sounding throughout the facility. Admiral Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system, his tone sharp with urgency. All department heads to the strategic center immediately. We have visitors. The strategic center was a spherical chamber at the heart of the Prometheus facility, its walls covered with displays showing every aspect of human space. As Mackenzie entered, she could see the problem immediately. 3 ships had appeared at the edge of the solar system, their configurations matching Council design patterns. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the central command station, his face grim as he reviewed the sensor data. They arrived 15 minutes ago. No warning, no communication protocols. They just dropped out of hyperspace and began moving toward Earth. President Chen materialized as a hologram, transmitted from the United Earth Government headquarters. What's their apparent purpose? Unknown, but, based on their approach vector and the types of scanning beams they're using, I'd say they're conducting the follow-up observation they mentioned. They probably expect to find us sitting quietly, accepting our quarantine like good little primitives. Elena Vasquez stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. The timing is interesting. It's been exactly 6 months since the Council session. That suggests this is a scheduled check-in, not a response to anything we've done. Which means, Admiral Rodriguez said with a cold smile, they have no idea what we've been up to. Dr. Mackenzie felt a surge of savage satisfaction. How long before they reach Earth? At their current speed, about 18 hours. But, that's using conventional propulsion. If they switch to their advanced drive systems, they could be here in minutes. President Chen's hologram leaned forward. Status of our preparations? Admiral Rodriguez activated a series of displays that showed the true extent of humanity's transformation. Hidden bases throughout the solar system, weapon platforms that existed in folded space, defensive networks that operated across multiple dimensions. Humanity had not been idle. The Prometheus weapons are ready for field testing, he reported. The dimensional fold fleet is standing by in compressed space around Jupiter. And our new defensive grid is. He paused, searching for words, unprecedented. Elena studied the approaching ships through the tactical display. They look exactly like the types of vessels we saw at the Council. Standard configuration, predictable approach patterns, no apparent awareness that they might be flying into anything other than a routine observation mission. That's about to change, Admiral Rodriguez said. Dr. Mackenzie, are your people ready to show our visitors exactly what 6 months of human innovation looks like? Mackenzie thought about the breakthroughs they had achieved, the technologies that violated every established principle of galactic development, the weapons that existed in mathematical spaces the Council couldn't even perceive. We're ready, she said simply. The next hours passed with agonizing slowness as humanity's leadership coordinated their response. This wouldn't be an act of aggression, the Council ships had every right to observe Earth under the quarantine protocols they had established. But, it would be a demonstration of exactly how wrong the ancient species had been about human potential. As the Council ships entered the outer solar system, their scanning beams began sweeping across human space. The readings they received must have been confusing energy signatures that didn't match known technology patterns, gravitational anomalies that suggested impossible engineering, quantum fluctuations that indicated experiments beyond their understanding. The lead ship, a crystalline vessel that matched Zephyrian design patterns, transmitted a message toward Earth. Elena translated the formal Council protocols that appeared on the communication screens. Attention primitive species designated humanity. This is researcher Zaleth of the Galactic Council Observation Corps. We are conducting a routine assessment of your development under Quarantine Protocol 7. Prepare to receive inspection teams and comply with all directives. The arrogance in the message was unmistakable, even filtered through translation systems. These beings still thought of humanity as children to be managed, specimens to be studied, primitives who would naturally comply with superior authority. Admiral Rodriguez looked around the strategic center, his expression asking a silent question. Every person present, scientists, military officers, diplomats, leaders, nodded in response. They were ready. Dr. Mackenzie, the Admiral said formally, please demonstrate human technological development for our visitors. Mackenzie activated the first phase of what they had codenamed the Revelation Protocol. Throughout the solar system, human installations began declocking. Bases that had been hidden in folded space unfolded into normal dimensions. Weapon platforms that existed as mathematical constructs materialized into physical reality. The defensive grid that protected Earth revealed itself as a web of interconnected nodes that stretched across 17-dimensional layers. The Council ship's scanning systems immediately began registering readings that violated their understanding of physics. Energy output levels that should have been impossible for a species that had only recently achieved interstellar flight. Weapon signatures that operated on principles their science couldn't explain. Defensive systems that seemed to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. The crystalline ship transmitted another message, this one noticeably less formal. Human vessels, explain the nature of your technological displays. These readings are inconsistent with your designated development level. Elena smiled grimly as she prepared humanity's response. Researcher Zalef, this is Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Government. We are happy to demonstrate our development for your assessment. Please observe. Mackenzie activated the second phase. Near Jupiter, space itself began to fold as the dimensional compression fleet emerged from its hiding place. 50 ships that had been compressed into a volume smaller than a basketball expanded to their full size, each one incorporating technologies that the Council had dismissed as impossible toys. But, the ships themselves were not the demonstration. Each vessel opened its cargo bays and released swarms of what appeared to be construction drones. Within minutes, the drones had assembled a massive structure that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously, a space station that was bigger on the inside than its external measurements could possibly contain. The Council ship's scanning beams intensified, their readings becoming increasingly frantic as they tried to understand what they were seeing. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond Earth's capabilities, let alone the exotic physics required to make such construction possible. Researcher Zaletha's next transmission carried a note of concern that transcended species barriers. Human government, explain the nature of these constructions. Our science division requires clarification of the principles involved. Of course, Elena replied pleasantly. Dr. Mackenzie, would you care to explain our recent innovations to our guests? Mackenzie stepped forward, activating a communication array that broadcast directly to the council ships. Researcher Zaleth, what you're observing is the result of 6 months of human research into what your council dismissed as primitive toys. We have successfully weaponized mathematics, created stable pocket universes, and developed consciousness-based quantum manipulation systems. The pause that followed her explanation was telling. When Zaletha's response came, the translator systems detected stress patterns in the alien's voice. Impossible. These technologies require development periods measured in millennia. Your species lacks the foundational knowledge for such achievements. That, Admiral Rodriguez interjected, is where you're wrong. He activated the third phase of the demonstration. Throughout human space, the true scope of their transformation became visible. Mining operations that existed in accelerated time streams, allowing them to extract resources at impossible rates. Manufacturing facilities that operated in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating materials that existed in states of organized impossibility. Research stations where human consciousness directly interfaced with quantum reality, pushing the boundaries of what thought itself could achieve. But, perhaps most impressive was the revelation of humanity's new military capabilities. Weapons that fired bullets composed of crystallized time. Defense shields that redirected attacks into pocket universes where they could explode harmlessly. Ships that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously while remaining functionally singular. The Council ships began backing away from Earth, their movements suggesting alarm that needed no translation. These beings had expected to find a primitive species cowering under quarantine, grateful for their superior oversight. Instead, they had discovered a technological revolution that challenged everything they thought they knew about development patterns. Researcher Zaletha's next transmission carried unmistakable panic. Human government, these capabilities represent a clear violation of Quarantine Protocol 7. Advanced technologies are not permitted for Class C civilizations. Compliance is mandatory. Elena felt the moment crystallizing around her like a perfect jewel of vindication. This was the moment when humanity would announce itself to the galaxy, not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as a force that could no longer be dismissed or controlled. Researcher Zaleth, she said, her voice carrying across the vast distances between worlds, humanity formally rejects Quarantine Protocol 7. We reject the Council's authority to classify our civilization. And, we reject the assumption that young species must follow the paths laid down by ancient ones. The silence that followed her words seemed to stretch across the entire solar system. In the strategic center, every human present felt the weight of history shifting beneath their feet. They had just declared independence from a galactic civilization that had existed for millions of years. When Zaleth finally responded, his voice carried a note of desperate authority. Human representatives, you do not understand the consequences of rejecting Council authority. Compliance is not optional. Military enforcement will be authorized if necessary. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression calm but his eyes holding the cold fire that had driven human achievement throughout history. Researcher Zaleth, humanity would welcome the opportunity to demonstrate our military innovations to Council forces. Please, by all means, send your fleets. The threat hung in the space between worlds like a challenge that could reshape galactic history. The Council ships accelerated away from Earth, their mission of observation having revealed far more than they had ever expected to find. As the alien vessels disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news that would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy, the humans in the strategic center felt a mixture of triumph and apprehension. They had just announced their emergence as a galactic power, but they had also guaranteed that the ancient species would respond with everything they had. The war was coming, and, this time, the galaxy would discover exactly what humanity had learned during 6 months of focused anger and unlimited innovation. The Council had mocked them, dismissed them, treated them like children. Now they would learn what happened when human children decided to grow up all at once. The Galactic Council emergency session was unlike anything in recorded history. For the first time in over 8,000 years, every single member species had sent their highest representatives to the Grand Chamber, and the artificial clouds that normally sparkled with peaceful light now roiled with the electromagnetic signatures of heated debate. Veltar stood at the center of the high circle, his ethereal form flickering between states of agitation as he processed the reports that continued to stream in from the observation mission to the human system. The data was impossible, contradictory, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Read the specifications again," he commanded researcher Zaleth, whose own crystalline form showed stress fractures that would take cycles to heal. Zaleth's voice carried across the chamber, each word adding to the growing sense of crisis. Energy output consistent with stellar engineering projects. Weapons systems that operate across 17 confirmed dimensional layers. Manufacturing facilities that appear to violate causality itself. Defensive networks that redirect attacks into artificially created pocket universes. The Catharian delegate's mandibles clicked in disbelief. A single observation post? You're describing a civilization that should require millions of years to develop such capabilities. That's not the worst of it, Zaleth continued, his stress patterns becoming visible as fluctuations in his crystalline structure. Their consciousness-based quantum manipulation systems appear to be biologically integrated. They're not using external technologies to achieve these effects, they're somehow doing it with their organic neural networks. A ripple of shock passed through the assembly. The idea that a biological species could directly interface with quantum mechanics without technological intermediaries was beyond the realm of possibility according to every established model of evolutionary development. The Zarathi representative extended multiple tentacles in what every species present recognized as extreme agitation. How is such development possible? We have monitored thousands of emerging species. All follow predictable patterns. None achieve advanced capabilities without first mastering the foundational technologies. Veltar turned to address the full assembly, his voice carrying the weight of authority but also unmistakable concern. The humans appear to have developed capabilities by ignoring established progression patterns entirely. They have somehow skipped millions of years of normal technological evolution. The Moravian representative pulsed with angry light frequencies. Impossible. The laws of development are universal constants. No species can violate the fundamental principles of advancement. From the observation gallery, Dr. T.H. Lan of the Council's Research Division stepped forward to address the assembly. The ancient being's multiple sensory organs focused on the gathered representatives as his translation matrix conveyed complex scientific concepts across hundreds of different communication systems. Honored Council, he began, I have spent the past 3 standard days analyzing the data from the human observation mission. The conclusions are disturbing. The humans have not violated the laws of development, they have discovered entirely new laws that our science never predicted could exist. The chamber fell silent. In 10,000 years of council history, no one had ever suggested that their understanding of universal principles might be incomplete. Dr. T.H. Lan continued, his academic composure barely concealing his excitement and fear. Human consciousness appears to operate on quantum principles that we assumed were purely theoretical. They don't just think about solutions, their thought processes actually alter probability matrices at the subatomic level. When a human believes something is possible strongly enough, they can make it possible through sheer cognitive force. The Silithian representative's high-pitched communications created harmonic patterns of disbelief. You're suggesting that they can change reality through thought alone? Not change, Dr. T.H. Lan corrected. Convince. Reality apparently responds to human determination in ways that our models never predicted. They don't build impossible technologies, they convince the universe that their technologies aren't impossible. Veltar felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia, genuine fear. What are the implications for galactic security? Dr. T.H. Lan's response sent chills through every species present. If my analysis is correct, the humans are not bound by the physical limitations that constrain the rest of us. Their development rate isn't just accelerated, it's potentially infinite. They could theoretically achieve capabilities that surpass our own within decades rather than millennia. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species began communicating in overlapping frequencies, creating a cacophony of panic, disbelief, and anger. The ancient order that had governed the galaxy for millions of years was suddenly, unthinkably, under threat from a species that had been dismissed as primitive children just months before. The gravitonic collective's deep pulses cut through the noise like cosmic thunder. The quarantine has failed. The humans have rejected council authority. What is our response? Veltar raised his appendages for silence, his form solidifying into its most authoritative configuration. The council recognizes the unprecedented nature of this situation. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that pose a direct challenge to galactic stability. Military intervention is now authorized under Emergency Protocol 1. The words carried weight that transcended political rhetoric. Emergency Protocol 1 had never been invoked in the entire history of the Council. It authorized the use of any means necessary to eliminate a threat to galactic civilization. The Catharian delegate stepped forward, its warrior caste instincts finally finding purpose after millennia of peaceful governance. The Hive maintains a reserve fleet of 12 million combat vessels. We can begin mobilization immediately. The Zarathi representative's tentacles writhed with aggressive patterns. The Confederation's reality-warping dreadnoughts are available for deployment. Our dimensional weapons can unmake entire star systems. The Moravian energy being pulsed with cold light. The collective maintains gravitational manipulators capable of creating artificial black holes. We can eliminate the human system without leaving a trace. But, Dr. Th. Lan's next words stopped the rush to military action cold. Honored Council, I must advise extreme caution. Based on the observed human capabilities, conventional military responses may not be effective. Veltar turned to focus on the scientist, his ethereal features sharpening. Explain. The humans have demonstrated defensive systems that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Our weapons operate in a maximum of 7-dimensional layers. They have shown the ability to redirect attacks into pocket universes where our weapons would be harmless. Most concerning, their consciousness-based reality manipulation could potentially turn our own weapons against us. The implications hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. The Council's military might, built up over millions of years of conquest and expansion, might be useless against an enemy that could convince reality to function according to different rules. The Silithian representative's harmonics rose to near-panic frequencies. Are you suggesting that the humans are invulnerable? Not invulnerable, Dr. Th. Lan replied carefully. But, possibly immune to conventional approaches. They think differently than we do. They operate by principles we don't understand. Fighting them with traditional methods would be like trying to solve a mathematical equation using emotional responses. The gravitonic collective's response carried undertones of deep concern. Then, how do we proceed? We cannot allow an uncontrolled species to threaten galactic stability. Veltar spent several long moments considering the options, his form flickering through different states as he processed the unprecedented situation. Finally, he reached a decision that would reshape the destiny of the galaxy. We will proceed with a combined arms approach, he announced. Military pressure to contain the human expansion, diplomatic isolation to prevent them from forming alliances, and scientific research to understand their capabilities well enough to develop countermeasures. The Catharian delegate's mandibles clicked approvingly. The Hive will coordinate fleet movements. How large a force do you recommend? Everything we have, Veltar replied grimly. If the humans can indeed manipulate reality through consciousness, then, our only advantage is overwhelming numerical superiority. We will deploy every available vessel from every member species. The magnitude of the proposed response sent shock waves through the assembly. The combined council fleets numbered in the quintillions of vessels. Such a force had never been assembled in galactic history. It was enough to conquer multiple galaxies simultaneously. Dr. Th. Lan raised a concern that made everyone present uncomfortable. Such a massive deployment will take considerable time to coordinate.
The humans have demonstrated rapid development capabilities.
They may use that time to advance their capabilities further. Then, we will have to accept that risk, Veltar decided. The alternative, allowing an uncontrolled species with reality manipulation abilities to develop without constraint, is unacceptable. The humans will learn that youth and innovation cannot overcome the accumulated power of millions of years of galactic civilization. As the council session dissolved into frantic planning sessions, with representatives coordinating the largest military response in galactic history, none of the ancient beings present understood the fundamental error in their thinking. They were still approaching the human problem as if it were a conventional challenge to be solved through conventional means. They were planning to fight tomorrow's war using yesterday's strategies, against an enemy that had already moved beyond the battlefield entirely. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, humanity was receiving real-time intelligence about the Council's plans through methods that the ancient species couldn't even detect. Dr. Webb's consciousness-based quantum networks had evolved beyond mere communication. They now allowed human minds to observe events across galactic distances by convincing space itself that distance was a negotiable concept. Elena Vasquez stood in the Prometheus facility's strategic center, watching the Council's panicked preparations through quantum observation systems that operated on principles the ancient beings had dismissed as impossible. "They're mobilizing everything they have," she reported to the assembled human leadership. "Every species, every fleet, every weapon system. They're treating us as an existential threat to galactic civilization." Admiral Rodriguez studied the tactical display showing the massive Council mobilization. "They're not wrong," he said simply. "We are an existential threat to their civilization. We represent everything they've forgotten how to be." President Chen's image flickered in the holographic display as quantum interference from humanity's dimensional experiments occasionally disrupted even their own communications. "Dr. Mackenzie, what's our timeline for the next phase of development?" Dr. Mackenzie consulted displays showing research progress across dozens of breakthrough projects. "We're close to several major advances. The consciousness weaponization project should be ready within weeks. The probability manipulation systems are approaching practical application. And Dr. Webb's work on convincing the universe that humans can exist in multiple states simultaneously is showing promising results." "How long before the Council fleets reach us?" Elena asked. Admiral Rodriguez performed rapid calculations based on the observed mobilization patterns. "Assuming they coordinate properly and don't encounter logistical problems, approximately 8 months. But that's for the advance forces. Their main battle fleets won't arrive for over a year." Elena felt a familiar surge of cold satisfaction. "They still don't understand what they're dealing with, do they?" "They're planning to fight a war," Dr. Mackenzie observed. "But wars are contests between civilizations that operate under the same fundamental rules. We've moved beyond rules into the realm of making our own reality." President Chen leaned forward, his expression serious. "The question is whether we want to fight this war at all. We could simply leave. Our dimensional technology could take us beyond their reach entirely." Admiral Rodriguez shook his head. "Running away proves their point. It confirms that we're still children, still afraid of the adults. If we want to be taken seriously, we have to show them that their authority is an illusion they've maintained through intimidation." Elena thought about the council session where humanity had been dismissed, mocked, quarantined like dangerous animals. The memory still burned with crystalline clarity, and she knew that every human working on the Prometheus project carried that same fire. "They want to teach us our place," she said finally. "Maybe it's time we taught them theirs." Dr. Webb appeared on the communication system, his image flickering with the quantum distortions that had become common around human consciousness researchers. "I've been monitoring the Council's communications," he reported. "They're treating this as a conventional military problem. They're planning to use overwhelming force to crush our resistance. Conventional force against unconventional capabilities," Admiral Rodriguez mused. "They're bringing swords to a reality manipulation fight." President Chen made the decision that would determine the course of galactic history. "Very well. We accept their challenge. Dr. Mackenzie, accelerate all research projects. Admiral Rodriguez, prepare our defenses for the largest military engagement in galactic history.
Ambassador Vasquez, prepare a message for the Council.
Elena felt the weight of the moments settling around her like a mantle of destiny.
What should the message say?
Tell them, President Chen replied, that humanity thanks them for uniting our species behind a common purpose. Tell them that their mockery has given us the motivation to become everything they feared we could be. And tell them that when their fleets arrive, they're going to discover exactly what happens when human children decide to show the adults how the game is really played. As humanity prepared for the war that would reshape the galaxy, the ancient species of the Council continued their massive mobilization, confident that their overwhelming numerical advantage would crush the upstart humans once and for all. They had no idea that they were marching toward their own obsolescence, led by beings who had already transcended the very concept of conventional warfare. The humans weren't planning to fight a war, they were planning to demonstrate that wars themselves were primitive concepts that belonged to a bygone era of galactic history. The Council would arrive expecting a battle, but they would find something far more dangerous, a species that had convinced reality itself that the old rules no longer applied.